Hello, everyone. I am Robyn Howlett. I am a certified matrimonial attorney with the Weinberger Divorce and Family Law Group. I am here today with a very special guest, therapist Nina Kaweblum, to share some really important information with you about how to overcome parent alienation. Do you suspect or know that your spouse is trying to turn your kids against you? Well, after watching this webinar, you'll have some new tools at your disposal for repairing your relationships. So let's get started with the information. I just want to first provide that this disclaimer, which basically indicates that this is for informational purposes only. This does not constitute any kind of legal or therapeutic advice from myself or from Nina. And be sure to direct any specific questions about your own situation to an attorney or to a therapist. So today we are going to look at how to recognize parent alienation and, more importantly, how to overcome it. We're going to focus on therapeutic tools and also legal recourse that can help you protect and restore your relationship with your children. To get the conversation started, I'm very pleased to welcome, again, Nina Kaweblum. Nina is a licensed clinical social worker, and she is a certified BVT therapist with her practice in Lakewood, New Jersey, and she focuses on parent alienation issues as well as reunification therapy as part of her practice. So welcome, Nina.
Thank you so much. It's very exciting to be here.
Okay. So we want to get right into this topic, Nina, and I'd like to start with the question of what is parent alienation and how is it different than really just two co-parents who have a bad relationship as a result of a divorce?
Okay, so, parents who are getting divorced clearly don't have, generally a good relationship and may have trouble co-parenting just as they had trouble co-parenting in marriage. That's not what we're talking about. Alienation is something else. Alienation is really when one parent has decided that the children are better off not having a relationship with the other parent, either because they think it's better for the children or because they are so angry and harbor such hatred of the other parent that they don't want the children to have anything to do with the other parent. So it's going to be very different, and it's going to look very different. I do want to point out that often there is some sort of a combination where the targeted parent, as you see in the bottom, who is blamed for everything, may in fact be blamed for some things, and that sometimes there is a small rupture in the relationship that in a two-parent home maybe would have made the parent less close to the children, but certainly not alienated. But once there's a situation where there's a divorce and there's acrimony, that alienating parent could take some of these characteristics or these issues and use them to make the separation and the tension between the children and the parents so great that the children think on their own, yeah, I don't want anything to do with mommy. I don't want anything to do with daddy. So I'm just going to briefly give examples of what parents might do that the alienating parent then turns the children against the parent, with. One is a harsh or rigid parenting style. You could see how that would make the alienating parent be able to say, daddy's so mean to you, or mommy is out of control. She's so cruel, things like that. She's crazy, things like that. Or that the targeted parent may be self-centered and immature and wasn't really there for the children, which the parent can then say, oh, you see, she never called when you were sick, or he didn't do enough for you when you were sick. I've seen things like that. The third thing would be a rejected parent could be critical and demanding. So the alienating parent becomes warm and accepting, and to highlight how the other parent doesn't love the child or doesn't care about the child because they're so critical. And number four would be this can happen also is the more that there is this breach and the more that a parent feels rejected by their child, they might start having diminished empathy for the other child and treat them, with more anger, which then, of course, gets turned against them. I think also something you see that's different from just two parents who can't get along is there's a loyalty bind. The child feels pulled to take care of the other parent or to defend the other parent, to the alienating parent against the targeted parent. Okay, and those would be the main differences. And as it says in the beginning, you see that there is that the way the child feels about the parent is way out of proportion. Even though I mentioned things that the targeted parent may have done, the hatred, the anger that the child shows isn't warranted. It's just too intense and it's too extreme.
Okay, so based upon our own research here, we understand that there are essentially 3 general types of alienating parents. So let's talk a little bit about those 3 different types and how we can spot which type of alienator a party may be up against.
Okay, great. So right, as it says in the slide, there's 3 types: the naive, the active, and the obsessed. The naive is the least intense type of alienation. It's often done more out of parental ignorance rather than because they are the alienating parent is looking to alienate. It's just more they're upset about certain things perhaps that are done, and they may say it without realizing that this could even cause a problem. For example, the child comes home and says, I need the coach said I need new shoes for soccer. And the mother, who doesn't have that much money, might say, tell your father he has more money, he should buy the shoes, which is an implication that the father's not around to be doing this, and also maybe putting the father in a bad spot if he actually doesn't have the money that the mother thinks he does, or for whatever reason doesn't want to buy the shoes. So here, this type of parent may not want to do it on purpose, or maybe you have a mother who has never been separated for her kids. So when they go to the father's house for the first time, she's very nervous, and she'll say, "Call me. I want to make sure you're okay. I want to hear how you're doing." Or if they call her, she'll say, "You okay? Do you have enough to eat?" Which implies the father's not taking care. Again, the mother doesn't necessarily mean to do this. Usually, once the divorce has been finalized and a routine is established, and the father proves that he can actually take care of the children, or vice versa, usually this dies down, because again, this type of parent doesn't mean to alienate. Okay, the next one would be an active or more deliberate alienator. So here there is more of a intention to hurt the other parent. It's not necessarily to cut off all relationship with the other parent, but it is to perhaps diminish it. And this is usually because the alienating parent has been so hurt by the father. Your father's cheating on me. Obviously, she's hurt by this. This is not information that the child should know about. But it usually comes with a sense of loss of self-control. Maybe the kids came home and said that they had a good time with the girlfriend, and the mother's not thinking, "Oh, I have to put a stop to this," but she's just so upset that she wants the kids to know how painful that is for her. So, again, this is not what a parent should be doing, and it is harmful for the children. And it does force that loyalty bind, which we had talked about, or the loyalty, conflict that I had mentioned earlier. But this type of parent, an active alienator, generally, if they are put into therapy, they can be taught that what they're doing is destructive for their child and harmful to their child, and they will learn how to stop. The third type, which is the obsessive alienators, these are the ones you read about in the papers or online, and are very difficult, because these are people who are, like it says, they're bent on destroying the child's relationship with the targeted parent. Now, they may have convinced themselves that the court doesn't know anything in this, and the evaluators don't know anything, but they know that this parent is really toxic, and they are therefore don't care what the court says and don't care what anybody else says. They are going to, quote unquote, rescue their child. So it's hard because they're not completely in touch with who the targeted parent really is, and they see them as like the source of all evil in the world, and will not listen to authority and will do basically whatever they need to do. They will just not comply and wait and see. Is the court going to do anything? Are the police going to do anything? And then if nothing is done, they're just empowered to do this further. They don't see at all how they're harming their children, and it's almost like they don't care.
Okay. So now that we have an understanding of sort of what an alienator looks like with the three different categories, we've been focused on what that looks like in terms of the parents and the adults. But obviously we have these children who are in the middle of all of this. So what would you say about the children, and in your experience, how are the children affected by this alienation?
So in a few different ways. First of all, I would point out again that alienated children have their own unique presentation, that the way they act is very different. It's interesting because if you'll speak to children who are actually abused, they often are not as angry as alienated children, and they may have feelings for the abusive parent, and they may even feel protective about the abusive parent. You don't see any of this in alienation. Again, this is not therapeutic advice. We are not diagnosing abused and not abused. I'm just pointing out that in general, this is what you're going to see. So you're going to see alienated children who again, the way they describe the parent and the way they feel about the parent really does not match up to the history of the relationship or anything that the parent has done. I'll ask a child, look, why do you hate your father so much? And they'll say, I don't, or why do you hate your mother so much? And, these obsessively alienated children will say, well, they're just bad. They just make me anxious. But they don't have anything concrete that the parent has done. And it's more of this, they give this idea, well, they might do this. I'm just waiting for them to do this. So their fear is based on really just capturing and identifying with what the obsessed parent has been saying about them. There's different signs that we use to be able to know, conclude that this child is probably alienated. What I've said before, also there's a lack of an ambivalence. They have a zero guilt. I've seen one child say to his mother in front of me, I hate you. I hate you. The only thing I want from you is to leave me alone. And they feel no guilt in saying it. They almost feel like the parent deserves it. Anybody who will say differently becomes their enemy. So there's also, like I said, they'll reject anybody associated. So that could be a therapist. That could also be any of the grandparents or aunts or uncles or cousins, or who used to be somebody that the child really liked and liked to be with, but now they hate them also.
Okay, so what I'd like to talk about now is really how to overcome this alienation. I think we'll all agree that it's really unfortunate circumstance that a parent and children may be in. And so as a therapist, what would you immediately want alienated parents to know?
Okay, so I'm going to give first, and then with later slides, I'm going to be some more specifics. But what I'd like to do now is just give sort of a general main points, and I think that this would go for any of the types of alienation, even for the obsessed alienation. So first of all, like this slide says, you have to realize that you're the only person in this situation who can do anything and is going to be willing to change. Certainly the alienating parent is not going to be changed. A lot of times targeted parents will come and they want to explain to me how terrible the alienating parent is. And I understand, the need to vent and get validation and support, and that's very important. At the same time, we need to focus more on what can the targeted parent do to turn this around, because surely the alienating parent, especially the obsessed one, is not interested in changing. Also, as I pointed out before, often the alienation sort of built on what anyway would have caused somewhat of a strain or conflict between the parent and the child due to the targeted parent's behavior. So it's very important that they take responsibility for that piece and change that, because that way the alienator doesn't have a foothold. They don't have anything to build on in order to turn the children against them. I think it's very important to also understand that the child doesn't really understand what's going on, and also to see this as a long-term process. It's a lot of times it suddenly like gets better, but that's only after a long period of work where you almost don't see anything going on. But all of a sudden it does happen. I think that there's also a very important piece in that you want to do a lot of self-care. This is an extremely painful and difficult time, and parents who take care of themselves and have a life besides the fact that they're alienated from a child will have the emotional strength and also just be a more appealing parent to help with the reunification process. So those would be the main points for everybody.
And then, so one of the most common traits that you've discussed as far as an alienator goes is that they badmouth and they attack the targeted parent. So when this happens in front of the children, and oftentimes is stretching the truth, how would you say the alienated parents can respond to this?
Okay, so here I would say that some things would be in general, and some things, for depending on the type of alienation, you're going to want to address it differently. So in general, it's very important for parents not to take the bad mouthing and the lies personally. It's very painful, and here's a child who you once had a relationship with, and it's really devastating. And sometimes parents can get angry at the child and hurt by the child, understandably so. However, it's not helpful. You have, the first thing is to tell yourself that the child it's almost like somebody who had a fever. They're not seeing clearly, and they're just as much a victim really of the alienating parents' alienation as you are. And you have to see it as, I need to help my child, rather than being angry or thinking that the child's being disrespectful and now I need to show them that they have to respect me as a parent. That in this situation, it's not the time for that. This is only going to backfire and make the child see the parent as mean. The second thing is that you need to understand if, for example, the alienating parent is telling the child, mommy has this very explosive temper. She's just so hard to be around. So if you then explode, then all you're doing is feeding the side of the alienation. So it's very important to understand that you don't want to do that. I think it's very important also, especially with this last type, the obsessed type, is that there's going to be two stages. When you have a naive child who comes and tells you, Daddy said that you don't want us to have vacation together. So with a naive alienation or even the active, as long as it hasn't really progressed to the part where the child is so angry, you can correct that. And it's important that you correct it. It's very important, not by putting the other parent down, but by just correcting, no, of course I want you to go out and have a nice vacation with Daddy. I want you to have a good time. So you very much need to correct that. Sometimes, though, when you get with the obsessed alienation, when you say, no, that's not true what mommy said, then the child gets more angry and says, how dare you say mommy's a liar? You always put down mommy. And sometimes that's just not, you can't go in that direction. First, what you need to do is you need to make your child feel cared about. So it would be something like, oh, wow, you think that I don't want you to go on vacation with mommy? No wonder you're angry. So first you have to join with the child, support them, even if though it's a mistaken thought. And then when the child hopefully will calm down a bit, you can throw in, actually, I really do want you to have a great vacation. So something like that. But you have to remember, it's a two-step thing. Here, you're going to need to first not attack the child, not attack the mother, even though it's you might be dying to, because it's not true what they're saying. Okay, so that's that.
So when it's escalated to the point where there's a fracture in the parent-child relationship as a result of this alienation, and now we have a situation where the child is refusing to speak to the other parent, what can that parent do?
Okay, so the most important thing is don't give up. Don't give up. Giving up will also be used as ammunition against the parent. You see, they don't care. Like, parents will maybe say something like, well, the child told me I don't want to talk to you. Or, I get more upset when you call me. So parents will back down, but then the child goes, you see, they don't care. They don't care. They have nothing to do with me. So the parent feels like, what am I supposed to do? My advice, again, in general, not maybe there's specific situations that might be different, but in general, the idea is don't give up, because again, when the breakthrough comes, it could come very suddenly. And by the parent always letting the child know, I'm here for you, I care about you, even if you're pushing me away, I'm not moving, you can trust me, you can count on me, I'm consistent. Eventually that message does somehow get through. I've seen cases where parents have given up and the children were just ready to start trying the relationship, and then all of a sudden the father's no longer emailing, and the children say, you see, I can't trust him. Sometimes he's here and sometimes he's not. So not giving up is really crucial. So you can send gifts, you can send cards, you attend school events. All of these things are very important. Something I see very, very important is if the alienating parent, for some mysterious reason, actually tells the targeted parent something that's going on with the child, if the parent doesn't then respond directly with the child, or for example, one time, like, a child went to the hospital because she had an infection, and the father, who felt that the mother really hated him and didn't want to hear from him anyway, and the child was sick, so he never called to find how the child was doing. So the mother certainly used that very much against the father later on, and then the child would come and go, and daddy doesn't care about me because when I was in the hospital, he never called mommy to see how I was doing. So you just have to be there no matter what kind of response that you're getting. I think something else that's very important is don't feed the flames. There's a quote that says, one father said, I don't know how to make it better with the mother, but I do know how to make it worse. Very important. Don't make it worse. And then if there is alienation going on, but the children are still willing to see you, make it as much fun as possible. Be positive. This is not the time where you tell them all the things that they're doing wrong and they need to fix, even if you're right. You just have to be very, very positive and try to build up that side of the relationship.
It's one of the things that it was mentioned in one of the earlier slides, is that your child can reflect on your story as he matures. What he doesn't understand at age 6 will make more sense at 16. So specifically with regard to this tip that you're providing, I think from what I'm hearing, the continued efforts will go a long way. And certainly as this child matures and can sort of break free from the emotions of that alienating parent, it may all fall into place as that child matures. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. I'm working with one case where there's 2 sisters. One of them is over 18 and has refused to have anything to do with the child, and the court obviously can't do anything about it. And the younger sister, younger than 18, has been fighting against, being the alienated parent. What's interesting is that I think the consistency that the alienated parent has shown towards the younger sister has paid off towards the older one, because the older sister actually reached out about a month ago to this parent and has restarted a relationship with, so I think
that's a great example of this tip. Don't give up. Absolutely.
Don't give up. Absolutely do not give up.
So obviously it's just human nature. We want to, fight back. And when it is tempting to fight fire with fire, when it comes to emotions, how can the alienated parent keep cool in this, very difficult situation?
Right. This is like the $1 million question, because it's so hard. It's just so hard, and it's so painful, and we're humans, and everything. And people say, oh, you want me to be like superhuman? And unfortunately, the answer is yes, because a person is in a very volatile, difficult, sensitive situation, and it actually calls for, more effective, more skilled responses than everyday life. And it is hard. I'm not minimizing how hard it is. It's just, it is so crucial because of all the things we've said. Otherwise, any small blow up gets magnified by the alienated parent and gets used against the person a million times and blown out of proportion and out of context. So a person really has to learn how to manage their emotions. Like you said, if your ex tells your children you're scary and you don't even have to act like incredibly scary, but a drop scary, they'll say, oh, that's what mommy was talking about. She's right. And then or that's what daddy was talking about. He's right. And then the whole thing will really blow up. I don't know if I've been even with the genders, but I do want to point out that alienation, I think the research is showing, hits both mothers and fathers about 50% each. So it's not only that the mothers are alienating at this point. I think that was the previous conception, but it's not what the research is showing. That's just a side point.
Right. So knowing all of this, what do you think are some really good options for therapeutic support? So how can that therapy support for alienated parents work to try and undo the alienation and reunite with the children and sort of really bring this family to a different place?
Okay, so I think this is a very important point, because just as we've said that in the alienated situation, or however you want to call it, is unique in many ways. So I would say that the therapy is also different from maybe the average conception of therapy. I think the average conception of therapy is people come to the therapist's office, they talk, they vent, they get supported, they get validated. Perhaps they do like a little problem solving, but that's it. So that's not going to be enough in this situation, because as what we just said, it's so painful and it's so difficult, and it's requiring like a super parenting, which, even if a person is an excellent parent, they might not be prepared with all the tools to manage such a challenging, painful situation. It's very important to therefore have a therapist who not only could tell you things like, I think it's important to stay calm, but actually could teach you the emotional skills of how to stay calm, how, in the face of all of this, how not to blow up or do any of the types of actions that a parent could understandably do, but will backfire tremendously. So like the therapy that I do, DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, a major focus is teaching people emotion management and behavior management skills, so that when things get really so difficult and so painful and a person just would naturally explode, they actually have the tools and the emotional tools and skills not to do so, but even to react in a way that would be effective and helpful in repairing the relationship. So you need a therapist who's going to understand both the unique qualities of alienation and how to strategize with you, what in your particular situation you should be doing, as well as giving you these emotional and behavioral tools and skills.
Okay, so that was some really, really helpful information. And from what we're hearing, it's more about what a therapist can do for the alienated parent, because the person who's alienated, is going to continue to behave in such a way that they've been. But really what you and a therapist can do is help that alienated person, understand what needs to be done, how they can react to it.
Right.
So,
and then also, with the reunification therapy, to then, once the parent is prepared for this, to bring the child into the therapy as well. So hopefully to start off, with the goal of starting off new ways of interacting with each other so that the child can see, like, wait, my parent really isn't the way that the alienating parent is saying.
Right. And, that even getting to that reunification process can be somewhat challenging when you're dealing with an alienating parent. So
that's where you come in, Robyn.
Yeah, that's where I come in. That's my segue. So, in talking about things from a legal perspective, the courts in New Jersey want to foster relationships between both parents and the children because it's ultimately in the best interest of the children to have a good and healthy relationship with both parents. So when parents have, when a parent has tried to do everything they can, they've, modified their emotions and they've, reacted in certain ways to this alienating parent and, the relationship between the child is continuing to suffer. What can I possibly do? And most specifically, what can I do in the courts? So you can certainly file. At this point, it's likely going to be a post-judgment application because the idea is that at this point, there's been a divorce situation, there's been a parenting plan put into place that's not being followed. So the courts, take parenting time and orders very seriously, and they are increasingly sensitive to this issue of parent alienation. And the judges will take steps necessary to address and correct this parent alienation. So how are they going to do that? So, one of the first things you want to do, even before going into court, is you want to keep a record of everything. You want to maintain a custody journal. You want to keep all of your text messages, emails, voicemails. Obviously, you want to build a case so that you can show a judge that you have been alienated and you've done everything you can to foster your relationship with your child, and this other parent is seriously interfering with that. You can attach photos of birthday cards, gifts that you've sent, all of the activities that you've attended, and all of your efforts. So as you start to build all of that, you present that to a court and you provide a certification as to the background and the circumstances that have existed up to the point that you're filing the application. And what a court can do is actually order that other party, the alienating party, to go to one co-parenting counseling. They can order that the parents work with a parenting coordinator if there's constant conflicts regarding, the most simplest of activities or events. And the court, if the relationship has gotten so poor with the child and that alienated parent, can order the other party to cooperate and facilitate reunification therapy with the alienated parent and the children or child. And that's where then obviously Nina comes into play and she does her magic with regard to this reunification therapy. And at that point, a child can start to learn and appreciate the efforts that alienated parent has put forth and start to build on that. So a therapeutic parenting time arrangement when you have a breakdown of a relationship between two parties is very effective and can go a long way. So courts regularly order these things to happen because a court can certainly issue another order and say, okay, child has to go on Friday at 7, but if the relationship is so poor, that's really not going to get people anywhere. So then we have issues where this order has been put in place and the parties have been ordered to go to co-parenting counseling and or reunification therapy, and we still have the alienating parent who's not cooperating. And that too can be addressed by the court in a subsequent application, an enforcement application. And that parent there are enforcement mechanisms to really send a message to that alienating parent. There can be monetary sanctions imposed. I have seen courts go so far as to issue an arrest, bench warrant for an arrest of that parent, because the court, again, is sensitive to these issues and wants to do everything it can to have these parties comply with the order and improve upon the relationship between the children and the parents. I've had, situations where the child is even older, 16 years old, did not want to have any kind of relationship with his father. And what the court did in that situation is they actually appointed an expert to come in and do an evaluation as to whether or not this was just simply, a child and a parent not getting along for the reasons that mother was saying, or is this mother alienating this child and fostering that alienation. And what it was ultimately determined was that there was, in fact, parent alienation. and the court did in fact issue sanctions to that other parent and ordered reunification therapy. And even though the child was 16 and basically just wanted to shut down, he was still a minor, and the court took that seriously, and the reunification therapy was quite successful. So that's a really good story to share. But the courts really wanted to know what was going on. So the courts will do their due diligence and determine if it's alienation. Is it really in that case, the father who's being aggressive with the son or pushing the son away? And we later learned that it wasn't. So that's a really good tool to keep in mind. So certainly, if you think that there is parent alienation in your particular situation, speak with a family law attorney experienced with these issues and has had experience and knows what steps to take going forward. Work with an experienced therapist who knows about, again, parent alienation and all of the different subparts that Nina spoke about, and a therapist that can really help you get through this in terms of how you are going to react to the situation and how you are going to facilitate change. So that really is our conclusion of our presentation for today. I'd like to thank Nina for some really great and helpful information. It really was valuable, and more importantly, it was practical. So there were some really, really great tips. So thank you for that, Nina.
Thank you, and thank you so much. I mean, what a wonderful law group you are, where you provide this kind of information and help to your clients, and you care so much to really address the issues that I think are the most important to the parents, which is not losing their children. And I just think you do such a wonderful service. So thank you so much for including me in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really the key for our clients is to give them the information that they need, to work with the professionals that they need to work with. And you've done a wonderful job working with many of our clients and helping them through such a difficult period. So I think we're a great team, and I appreciate everything that you've had to offer. So if anybody in our audience that is...
Robyn, can I just do one more thing that I was thinking as you were speaking that I think is also very important, is that when I work as a reunification therapist, I am very open to having conferences with both lawyers. I can't be one lawyer at a time for neutrality reasons, but to really work with the lawyers. How can we work together to help this family move, towards a healthier outcome for the child? And it's the lawyers really can play a very important role also in the therapy. They're not two separate things. It's very helpful when the therapist and the lawyers can work together and collaborate.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, and thank you for that added comment. So if anybody in the audience who is observing this webinar, if you have any questions about parent alienation, you can certainly call us to schedule a free consultation to talk about your specific situation and get answers to your questions so that we can help strategize and direct you to the appropriate professionals, determine whether or not this is a case for court. So it's important to take the steps necessary to really protect the relationship that you have with your children. You can do that by calling us at 888-888-0919. And we can certainly provide you with all of Nina's contact information and provide you with a copy of these slides, whatever information it is you need that you think will be helpful. So thank you for attending, and have a great day.